from West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
Support for the Legislature Today is provided by the following.
AARP West Virginia, your ally for real possibilities in the Mountain State. Online at aarp.org/WV. West Virginia University. Online at wvu.edu.
At the Legislature today, medical marijuana is one step closer to becoming legal in West Virginia, but the latest version of the bill delays the program until 2019. In the Senate, members vote unanimously to add an abortion restriction to the state's telemedicine law, and the new Secretary of Commerce joins us to discuss the tens of millions of dollars the governor wants lawmakers to appropriate to attract new businesses to the state. Those stories and more coming up on the Legislature today. Good evening, I'm Ashton Mara. The House of Delegates has passed a Senate bill that would legalize medical marijuana in the state, but the bill has seen a number of changes since the 28-6 vote last week in the upper chamber. Liz McCormick reports.
During a late-night floor session yesterday, delegates voted on a handful of amendments to Senate Bill 386, including a committee substitute that completely replaces the Senate's version of the bill, with one sponsored by House Judiciary Chairman John Schott of Mercer County. Senate Bill 386 would now put the West Virginia Medical Cannabis Act under the control of the West Virginia Department of Public Health. It would create a 6% excise tax on marijuana and pushes the rollout date back 1 year to July 2019 instead of the Senate's July 2018 implementation date. The latest version of the bill does not allow distributors to sell forms of the drug that can be smoked or eaten, but does include prescription oils, pills, or patch versions, and a form that can be vaped. Judiciary Chair Schott says the bill would allow patients to make their own baked goods using the oils. Medical marijuana would also not be covered by Medicare or Medicaid. Delegate Schott has called this version of the bill a cautious approach to a controversial issue. Delegate Tom Fast, a Republican from Fayette County, spoke in opposition to the bill as it was put to a final vote today. He argued since it is still classified as an illegal drug by the federal government, states shouldn't make their own rules about using medical marijuana without the Federal Drug Administration's approval and guidance.
We're declaring that we are no longer a state under the law. We're just going to join 28 other states and say we're not going to obey the law. That makes no sense to me. If 28 people are going to jump off a bridge, are you going to jump off a bridge with them? No. Are we a nation of laws or are we not? That is the decision that you are faced with today.
Republican Charlotte Lane of Kanawha County, who introduced her own bill this session to legalize medical marijuana that was never taken up in a committee, says this bill is a step in the right direction.
People might not be 100% happy with it, but folks, this is a lot further than we ever thought we would get this session. And we all know people who are sick that can benefit from this or might benefit from it. Now, yes, you can talk about maybe we should wait for the Federal Drug Administration. Well, folks, if you're dying, it doesn't matter. So if something can make you feel better and ease those last days, last weeks for the patient and for the members, then we ought to pass it.
Many supporters of the bill have said legalizing medicinal use of the drug could help veterans suffering from PTSD. But Delegate Roy Cooper, a Republican from Summers County, argued the legislation will just add another substance to the list of drugs that are abused in the state.
The veteran suicide issue can be answered by the paper in my hand. We now prescribe to veterans ever how many's on this page: Prozac, Zoloft, Cyanoquin, Wellbutrin, Valium, Ambien, Xanax, morphine, fentanyl, codeine, Ultram, Percocet, Vicodin. Veterans are getting these pills shoved in their hands at veterans hospitals all over the country in combination with each other. That's where our suicide issue is coming from with veterans. Now, so we put another drug out there and say, okay, you can take that on top of all this other stuff. And then go ahead and drink a little alcohol with that. It's a deadly cocktail, folks, a deadly cocktail.
Delegate Gary Howell, a Republican from Mineral County, supported the bill.
Now, I'm not a doctor, and I don't know all of the medical benefits. I don't know all of the medical downsides. But I do know that people in the end of life, it gives them hope. They've tried many other things. It hasn't worked. They know this won't cure their problem, but it will make them a little bit more comfortable. And if you've been with someone at the end of their life, you want them comfortable. And that's why I support this bill.
Judiciary Chair Schott pointed to a study from the American Medical Association that argued there was high-quality evidence medical marijuana has done a lot of good for sick and dying patients.
So shouldn't we give, based on studies like this, shouldn't we give our physicians the authority to use that type of tool to help their patients? And that's really what we've done. And we've instilled in this structure protections to be sure this is not abused and it's used properly. And for that reason, ladies and gentlemen, I strongly urge that we give our physicians this tool, that we pass this bill, and provide some relief to those who can benefit from it.
After an hour of debate, Senate Bill 386 passed 76-44 and now heads back to the Senate for consideration. If the Senate approves the bill, the West Virginia Medical Cannabis Act will head to the governor for a signature. But if the Senate refuses the House changes, the bill will go to a conference committee. Governor Jim Justice has said he could support medical marijuana in the state. For the Legislature Today, I'm Liz McCormick in the House.
From the campaign trail to his State of the State address, Governor Jim Justice has pushed plans to increase tourism in West Virginia as a way to diversify the economy. But he's also asked lawmakers for tens of millions of dollars to attract new business investment. Joining me tonight is Justice's pick to oversee the department that houses both of those initiatives. Woody Thrasher is the Secretary of the West Virginia Department of Commerce. Secretary, thank you so much for being here this evening.
Well, thank you for having me, Ashton. I'm excited to be here.
New to the world of government, so
Yes.
Why don't we start with what do you see your role as in this administration?
Well, when the governor discussed with me about taking this Secretary of Commerce position, his direction for me was to come and do what I could to generate economic development in the state of West Virginia. And he had confidence in my ability to do that, and I have some confidence in my ability to do it as well. I've been a businessman my whole career. I think I know how to create jobs, and I'd like nothing better than to apply that to the state that I love.
Well, let's talk about the governor's initiative to bring investment into West Virginia.
Right.
He's calling this his Save Our State Fund. Initially, he asked for $105 million for that fund, but, you know, in the tight budget times, he's decreased that asked sum. I think it's down to $25 or $30 million. What do you envision doing with that money should it end up in the final version of the budget?
Well, I think it's aptly named. I think it is a Save Our State, and it's fundamental that the basic premise is that West Virginia is 50th, and we are inherently tired of being 50th. And I know I speak for myself, and I think the governor, that's why we're both involved, is because we're tired of that. Our state is not only 50th, it's 50th and dramatically declining when you look at the state of our financial situation. The decline in coal has wreaked havoc on our economy. So what do? Well, you want to turn things around. And I think the governor has a great plan for that. I think the highway program he's proposed will absolutely stimulate the economy. It's a proven way to stimulate an economy through infrastructure. You end up with hard assets that you get benefit from years and years. But that in and of itself is not adequate. You need something to backstop that. All good construction projects ultimately come to an end. And so that SOS fund provides the backstop that sort of continues and perpetuates that economic activity. Specifically, those monies are going to be used to attract new businesses into the state and to grow those existing businesses.
How do we do that? Is it about research? Is it about marketing? How do we do those things?
Well, you know, it's been a great learning curve for me. We have figured out what it takes to bring industries to West Virginia. And what we found out is we had a couple of site consultants come, one of whom was critical in the Procter & Gamble facility being located in the Eastern Panhandle. And both site selection consultants identified the 20 top factors that bring businesses into states. Number 3 is the quality of life. 20 years ago, it wasn't in the top 20, but today it's number 3. So we have that, and we have it in spades. There is nowhere I think you can find a better quality of life than West Virginia. But that just gets you a seat at the table. What we really need is sites, prepared sites that businesses can locate in. So the vast, vast majority of those monies will be used to extend sewer lines, upgrade treatment plants, water lines, highways, grading of certain sites, to really prepare sites so they're ready for development. And when you do that, then you're competitive with those surrounding states and other people that you sort of compete with. But Ashton, in the end, West Virginia is topographically challenged. We have a lot of things that are great about the state, but some of those mountains become real detriments when we try to develop it. So having that money to prepare those sites will make a dramatic impact in the amount of businesses that we can recruit.
Now, Governor Justice's the other prong to his economic development plan is working with the Division of Tourism, essentially restructuring the Division of Tourism to allow it to attract more people, more visitors into the state. He's got a bill that's making his way through the State House that pulls some of the powers from the current Tourism Commission and gives them to the Tourism Commissioner, the person who works under your department.
Right.
Why should we centralize those kinds of powers?
Well, first, to have a concise format on how you advertise West Virginia. We're the best product that nobody knows about. And so the fundamental premise of tourism, and it's been established that dollars invested effectively in tourism produce great rates of return. And I think the goal was to have a more centralized message about West Virginia. You know, we're a small place and we don't have a lot of people, and sometimes we get very siloed and spread out over too broad an area. So I think the goal has been to centralize that message on tourism, and I think it's really going to be a rebranding of West Virginia. And I think it's the governor's desire that that be done in a centralized fashion. So I support that sort of centralizing of that decision making. I also have to tell you I support this dramatically increased funding for tourism. Under Chelsea Ruby's leadership, who's running the Department of Transportation, I think there are enormous opportunities for significant gains in that arena for West Virginia.
There's another bill that's making its way through the State House to move the Division of Forestry, which is under the Department of Commerce, to the Department of Agriculture. The Agriculture Commissioner was on our show early on in the season, and he said it's an initiative he supports because he thinks that we should treat the state's forests as an agricultural product. How do you feel about that transfer?
Well, first, I think that's a totally understandable perspective to take. However, it's the governor's position that we've been cutting trees for 200 years and we're still not making sufficient value-added products like furniture and other things. Clearly, those value-added products fall under the Department of Commerce. We want to sort of supercharge our value-added activities to these wood industries. And the governor believes that putting that again in that centralized fashion where we can keep track of all aspects from harvesting to finished products makes for a more efficient method.
Now, the governor made an announcement adjusting his budget. I think it's been about 2 weeks ago. And through that announcement, you all were able to rehire some of the foresters who were laid off last year. Where are we in the process of that rehiring? Well,
I think that's been a dramatic improvement to how forestry functions. DEP was kind enough to come over and do those inspections in the field at those logging activities, but that's not their primary purpose and that's not their expertise. These foresters are professionals and they know what they're doing, and the governor felt very strongly it was important to get them back on the job. So that has been done. 6 of those foresters are on, and I think another 6 are scheduled to be, and that sort of returns business as usual to the sort of policing of how that forestry takes place. We only harvest about 1/3 of the trees that we grow in West Virginia that should be harvested, so there's an abundance of raw product. So I think the goal is to make that forestry division as efficient as can be in terms of harvesting of trees, and as I said, that continuation of the value-added product.
Secretary of the Department of Commerce, Woody Thrasher, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Ashton. I enjoyed it.
We go to the Eastern Panhandle now, where we meet 4 more members of the 83rd West Virginia Legislature.
John Unger represents the state's 16th senatorial district from Berkeley County. A Democrat, Unger was elected to the chamber in 1998. He serves as the minority whip, previously serving as the majority leader until 2015. Senator Unger is a pastor, leading 3 congregations in the Eastern Panhandle, and says he's the first senator in history to serve that many churches. Darrell Coles was elected to the House of Delegates in 2006. He represents the state's 58th House District from Morgan County. A Republican, Coles serves as the majority leader and previously served as the minority whip. Sarah Blair is a Republican from Berkeley County. She represents the 59th House of Delegates district. Delegate Blair was elected in 2014 and at the time held the distinction of being the youngest person elected to public office in the state. She is the vice chair of the Committee on Political Subdivisions. Her father, Craig Blair, is a member of the West Virginia Senate. Marshall Wilson is a first-term delegate from Berkeley County. He represents the 60th House District as a Republican. Wilson served as a second lieutenant on active duty in the U.S. Army and was awarded the Bronze Star for his service.
As we reach the final days of this legislative session, members of both chambers are working to finalize dozens of bills and put them to a vote. Senators took up bills today ranging in topics from elections to littering. Senators put 20 bills to a vote today and considered amendments to more than a dozen others during their morning floor session, including 2 elections bills. House Bill 2364 would allow electioneering closer to a polling place. Currently, West Virginia law prohibits anyone from campaigning for or against a candidate or ballot measure from being within 300 feet of a precinct or an early voting location. Electioneering includes holding campaign signs, passing out flyers, or sample ballots. The House bill would allow that activity within 100 feet of a polling place. Charlie Trump is the Senate's Judiciary Chair.
So it changes from 300 feet to 100 feet. The distance that a person doing those things must stand while voting is going on. And the amendment we adopted yesterday clarified that for purposes of place where early voting occurs, the prohibition applies only during those hours when the early voting is actually taking place.
Trump says that distance is fairly standard across the country. Only 5 states, he said, use a 300-foot or larger restriction. The chamber approved the bill 34-0. House Bill 2319 was on second reading in the chamber and up for amendments. The bill would require candidates running for legislative offices or their candidate committees to report any fundraising they do during the legislative session to the Secretary of State's office within 5 days of the fundraising event. Senate Minority Leader Roman Prezioso attempted to amend the bill today, adding additional requirements for lobbyists as well. Prezioso's amendment would require lobbyists to report within 5 days any money they spend on lawmakers during the session.
Essentially, the rule says that if $1 is made during a fundraising event, that legislator has to report. I'm asking that any lobbyist who spends over $50 has to report within 5 days. So it certainly doesn't prohibit the lobbyist from taking you down to the cafeteria and buying you a Coke, and has to go through the reporting process. It has to be $50.
After a motion from Senator Trump questioning whether the amendment was germane to the bill, Senate President Mitch Carmichael ruled the amendment was not relevant and could not be considered. The bill will be up for a final vote in the chamber tomorrow. Senators did, however, accept a set of amendments to a littering bill that came from the House of Delegates. House Bill 2303 would increase the penalties for littering. As it passed the House, a judge could assess a fine from $100 to $10,000 for breaking the law, and a minimum of 8 hours to a maximum of 200 hours of community service. Senators increased those penalties, according to Judiciary Chair Trump, but Senator Randy Smith of Tucker County moved to add a new section to the bill, one that focuses on protecting the state's waterways.
This amendment increases the minimum and maximum fines for littering convictions in streams or other body of water throughout the state.
The chamber voted in favor of Smith's amendment, which now also requires magistrates to consult with the county's prosecuting attorney before dismissing the littering charges.
I guess in a lot of counties there's a problem with the magistrates just dismissing the fines involved with the littering.
House Bill 2303 will be up for a final vote tomorrow. House Bill 2509 was approved by the chamber today. The bill clarifies the state's telemedicine laws. Senator Trump explained that when lawmakers approved a telehealth bill previously, there were questions about whether doctors could treat some diseases in minors or adults who are still enrolled in public schools through the video conferencing system. Those diseases include psychiatric disorders, attention deficit disorder, and intellectual and developmental disabilities.
That was apparently something that had been going on before we passed the bill last year, and our bill threw the continuation of some of those programs into jeopardy. So this will fix that.
The bill, however, was also amended to exclude another healthcare practice.
It makes a prohibition on any healthcare provider. It says a physician or healthcare provider may not prescribe any drug with the intent of causing an abortion.
The two-step abortion pill is becoming a more common way to end pregnancies in the first 10 weeks. The bill was approved by the Senate on a 34-0 vote. It's been just over a year since the Capitol's new security system was put in place. For decades, nearly all entry doors at the West Virginia State Capitol were open to anyone during business hours, but that changed at the start of the 2016 legislative session after the creation of 2 public access points. We revisit this story tonight, where Liz McCormick reports it's been relatively smooth sailing for the change as it enters its 2nd year.
Conversations about more intense security for the public entrances of the state capitol were not new when the Republican majority began to put them in place during the 2015 session. After 9/11, the issue became a serious concern for lawmakers. But with an increased demand for metal detectors and other security equipment across the country, West Virginia's project fell by the wayside. That's largely because Capitol security, lawmakers, and visitors alike wanted to make sure new tightened safety measures wouldn't mar the beauty of the state Capitol building. But some were also concerned the checkpoints would be off-putting for some guests. Lawrence Messina, Assistant Secretary for the Department of Military Affairs and Public Safety, says after 9/11, other security, smaller, less noticeable measures were taken to increase safety on the Capitol grounds. But most doors into the Capitol continued to remain open to anyone. That is until last year.
Essentially, the purpose of this was just to enforce existing law. There is a law that prohibits the carrying of dangerous and deadly weapons onto this campus. This law has been on the books for some time, and this is just another way to enforce it. So it's not as if we really, changed the law or added to the law. It was just a way that we enforced the law, and it was because after these discussions, folks really thought that, given the climate we're in, all these other factors, to really maintain that balance, we should take this step.
The 2 public checkpoints are no different than if you went into a federal building or to an airport. Visitors simply place anything they're carrying onto a conveyor belt to be scanned while they walk through a metal detector. Messina says at first it did take a little time for some to adjust to the change, but overall it was painless.
What I'm hearing from our officers at the access points is that if they hear something more often than not, it's how folks are actually grateful that we took this step, because they do feel safer, and maybe it's because of what they're seeing in the news happening elsewhere.
Lieutenant Mark Swecker has been an officer with the Capitol Police since 2011. He says he remembers how open the Capitol was before the new system was put in place, but he agrees with Messina that now it's ultimately better and safer, while still being a relatively open campus.
You would think that people would actually be upset over being inconvenienced or what have you, but actually we have found the opposite to be true. We have had very few issues. Those issues that we have encountered, we've dealt with, we've made adjustments, we've made accommodations for people.
For Charleston residents Smita and Kirit Pujara, who walk from their home to the Capitol regularly, they agree the new system is a huge positive for both employees and visitors. But there are things Smita says she does miss.
I mean, we can outside, we have no problem. You can walk. On weekends, also sometimes we've come and we've been able to get through, so it's not been a problem. We just wish we could enter the main door sometimes, because that's closed off.
Lawrence Messina says the biggest challenge with the new security system over the past year has been keeping up with its maintenance, but he doesn't anticipate any problems during this legislative session. For the Legislature Today, I'm Liz McCormick.
Members of both the House and Senate will put their versions of the budget bill to a vote in their respective chambers tomorrow, and the business community is sharing its opinion of those bills. Tomorrow, Steve Roberts, president of the West Virginia Chamber of Commerce, joins us to discuss the proposals to increase some business taxes, including a plan from Governor Jim Justice that he's backing. Thursday, Governor Justice himself will join us to discuss the budget negotiations he's been conducting with lawmakers. Negotiations, he says, broke down last week. That's Thursday evening. And on Friday, the Legislature Today will be coming to you live from the Capitol Rotunda as lawmakers prepare for their final day of this legislative session. The special hour-long show begins at 6 p.m. This has been the Legislature Today. I'm Ashton Mara. Thanks for joining us.
Support for the Legislature Today is provided by the following.
AARP West Virginia, your ally for real possibilities in the Mountain State. Online at aarp.org/WV. West Virginia University. Online at wvu.edu. From West Virginia Public Broadcasting.